Let's discuss about the wind erosion now. What happened with water erosion? Like water acts as an agent over there to erode the soil. Similarly, in wind erosion, wind acts as an agent to erode the soil. This wind erosion mainly occurs in arid and semi-arid region. In India, like Rajasthan and near to the Rajasthan, Gujarat part, this is arid and semi-arid region where this wind erosion happens more when compared to water erosion because of the soil texture like sandy in condition, and these lighter particles can be picked up very easily by the wind, and then they can be transported from one place to another, and thereafter the fertility of the soil will be lost. Now, to occur this wind erosion, there is a mechanism to occur. So let's discuss about the mechanism. There are three processes involved in wind erosion. One is siltation, one is surface creep, and the third one is suspension. Here, siltation means it is about the series of jumping. The lighter particles will be jumped because of the high velocity of the wind, and they will be transported from one place to another. So, this is a series of jumping. This and the size of the particles which are involved in siltation, it is between 0.1 to 0.5 mm. And majority of the soil lost, that is around 75%, up to 75% of the soil which is lost, that is because of this siltation. Siltation means series of jumping. And second one is a surface creep. Here surface creep means rolling of the particles. Rolling. And the size of the particle varies between 0.5 to 3 mm. And up to 5 to 25% of the weight of the soil which is lost, that is because of the surface creep. And the third one is suspension. Suspension means the lighter dust particles which are very easy to carry away, those will be suspended in the air for some time, and those particles will be reaching the earth's surface only when it rains, right? So suspension is suspension of the dust particles in the air, and the size of the particle here is less than 0.5 mm, and up to 3 to 4% of the weight of the soil loss is because of the suspension. So these are three processes which occur in wind erosion. And one thing what you have to notice is, it is very obvious that we get confused with the size of the particle. So if you remember the mechanism properly, what happens if the size is heavy or the particle is bigger in size? Can it be easy to jump in the atmosphere? No. If the particle is heavy, it is not very easy to carry in the atmosphere. So there siltation cannot take place for heavier particles, and also suspension. Since suspension means it has to be suspended in the air for some time, if the particle is heavy, it is very difficult to be suspended in the atmosphere, right? So if you remember a very basic logic behind this, why it is so, it is very easy to remember about the size of the particle. You can know here that the size of the particle is medium size. Such particles only can be jumped very easily in the atmosphere. This jumping, the particles will be jumped up to some 30 to 60 centimeter in the air, and then again they fall to the earth surface, right? So the size particle is medium, and here to roll, the size particle is a bigger size. If the size is bigger, as I have told you, it cannot be jumped very easily in the atmosphere, so it has to roll on the surface, and the particle size is bigger. And suspension, since the dust particles are the size will be very less, so the size will be less than 0.1 mm. And in exam they will ask what is siltation, what happens in siltation or surface creep or suspension, and also the size particle, as well as up to what extent these occur in the in this mechanism. So you have to remember all the points. in mechanism. Now, after when the wind erosion takes place, there are so many factors which will be affecting the wind erosion, right? If you are talking about the climate, mainly in climate, wind will be the one which will be affecting. So in wind, the velocity of the wind, that is the one which is very important for wind erosion, right? If the velocity of the wind is very high, it is very easy to carry away the particles, and because of that, the all the top fertile soil will be eroded very easily, and the fertility of the soil will be lost. So that is one when we are talking about the climate. Next is vegetation. If vegetation or plants are there, that will hold the soil very tightly, and the soil cannot be eroded very easily, right? So if there is no vegetation, means the soil is very free to be eroded and it will be carried away easily by the wind. And the third factor is the soil. If it is having a rough surface, it is resistant to the erosion. If it is the soil is very loose and very easily light soil. If it is a light soil, then it can be carried away easily. So these are some important factors which will be affecting the wind erosion. Now let us talk about the soil loss equation due to wind erosion. Like what we learnt in water erosion, the universal soil loss equation which we had studied. Similarly, for wind erosion also, there is a formula given by Chappell and Woodruff. And the formula goes like this. This was given by Chappell and Woodruff in 1963. And the water erosion formula was given by Wishmere and Smith in 1978. Year is also very important. That might also be asked in the exam sometimes. Now this formula, how to remember the formula? Why we have to remember this formula? Because in exam what happens is they will change one of these parameters and they will ask us to identify which one is the correct one, right? So how do we remember this? I have a hint for this, how to remember this formula. Now I and R, you make it as an Ireland. Ireland is a country, right? And next is KFC. All of you know about the KFC, which is very famous for chicken. Next one is WD. What you can do with the WD is vada, right? Vada you can make out of WD, and for B you can make it bonda. So in Ireland, KFC is there where you get vada and bonda. So your formula is covered over here, and it is very easy to remember as well. And you will not be very confused in exam if it is asked, and if you know the hint how to remember this. Now we know how to remember the formula, but they might ask which parameter stands for what, what factor, right? E is, as usual, it is about the soil loss due to wind erosion, and I stands for soil cloudiness. Cloudiness is about the aggregation, how tightly the soil is formed. If, as I told you earlier, if it is very loose, it is very susceptible for erosion. If it is tightly held, it is difficult to erode. That talks about the soil cloudiness. And next is surface cover. Surface cover by the vegetation. And third one is surface roughness. How rough is the soil? Higher the roughness, more the resistance of the soil to the wind erosion. And F stands for soil texture. If the texture of the soil is light like sandy or sandy loam, then it is very susceptible to the erosion. If it is heavy like clay or clay silt, then it is difficult to erode such a soil. And next C, it is about the local wind. How is the wind condition over there? And next one is wind direction. Okay, I missed W. Okay. W stands for the field width. More the width of the field, more the roughness, more the light soil, more is the erosion through the wind. And D is for direction, and B stands for wind barrier. Wind barrier in the field. So these are the various parameters or the abbreviations of the different letters or the terms used here, and it is very important to remember what letter stands for what parameter, right? I hope you are clear about this wind erosion formula, right? Now next is the how do we conserve soil, or how do we save the sand, or reduce the wind erosion in that. In India, majorly the Thar desert in Rajasthan, that is of man-made kind, and that is where the wind erosion is of maximum extent. So to reduce this wind erosion, we have two opportunities where we can work. One is we can reduce the wind velocity, and second one is about the vegetation. So how do we reduce the wind velocity? We can, okay, one is I told you to reduce the wind velocity, and second one is not vegetation, it is about the alteration of the soil characteristics. Soil characteristics. How do we change them? Right? To reduce wind velocity, one is shelter belts. We shall discuss about this in detail. Next one is have a vegetation, and also alteration of soil character we can do with this tillage operations. And next one is wind breaks. So these are some ways through which we can reduce the wind velocity. The important one among these is shelter belt and wind breaks. So we shall talk about shelter belt and wind break now. Shelter belts are nothing but the long lines of the trees which can reduce the wind velocity. Suppose the wind direction is this way, and the shelter belts will be, let me write here, this is the wind direction, and the shelter belts will be planted across the wind direction. I mean the shelter belts, the line of the plants or the trees should be planted forming a barrier to the wind direction, so that this will this will reduce the wind velocity, and thereafter the plants will not be affected much, right? Now shelter belts, as I have told you, these are the number or trees. The shelter belts, how they will be like in the center, longer trees will be, then shorter, like this. So this forms like a triangle, and the side from where the wind is coming, this is called as windward side, and the direction where the wind is going, that is called as leeward side. Now the wind velocity will be reduced to 5 to 10 times on the windward side, whereas on the leeward side the velocity is reduced up to 30 times the height of the shelter belt. And these shelter belts are very advantageous to reduce the wind erosion. The thing what you have to remember is about the windward and the leeward, which is windward, which is leeward, and what about the reduction of the wind velocity because of the shelter belt. Next is about the wind breaks. Wind breaks are also similar to these, but here those can be some physical obstruction, and not only the trees, they can be some walls built or some stones kept across the wind direction, so that the velocity can be reduced, and thereafter the plants can be saved very much. And also windbreak, what happens is windbreak is some costlier when you compare to shelter belts. Shelter belts are a long-term solution, but what happens is after some point of time, the wind velocity again increases, and thereafter again it may cause some damage to the crops over there. So there are some advantages and disadvantages for windbreaks and also shelter belts. But nothing much to worry about. Only thing you have to remember is about this times to what extent the velocity is reduced. And next one is about the wave erosion. We learnt about water erosion and wind erosion separately. So next is wave erosion. Wave erosion is nothing but it is the combination of water plus wind erosion. So this is about the soil conservation, because how can we save the soil or conserve the soil from water and wind erosion. If you have any doubts regarding this, please let me know. I'll be happy to clear your doubts.